Hello and welcome to the STCfit podcast. I'll be your host today. My name's Nat Jurek, and with me I'll be joined by Ben Scott and Jason Galea. STCfit are a group of coaches who provide premium coaching and education services to high-achieving women who want to ditch the frustration and achieve the results they want when they want. On the podcast, we'll be discussing all things related to our 5-step method to experiencing total clarity in knowing how to achieve your goals, present and future. The podcast is brought to you by STCfit for all your online and personal training needs. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a share and tag at Nat Jurek STCfit, at Ben Scott STC, and at Jason Galea _STC. Hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome everyone to this week's episode of the STCfit podcast. So this week I have got a guest in Sophie. So I was just telling Sophie that I'm super excited to have her on because I know that she's got like just a wealth of information that she can bring to a lot of topics that we typically get asked about, a lot of topics that are maybe discussed over the internet and over social media, in the I don't want to say, in the wrong way, but in not the most qualified way. So I thought, what better way to sort of get someone on the podcast to unpack all of these topics. So welcome to the podcast, Sophie.
Woohoo! Thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure. Glad to be your debut podcast.
Yeah, my first podcast ever.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm excited.
Yeah, I know. Very exciting. So just tell the listeners a little bit about like who you are, who you work with, what you do. I haven't even introduced what you do, so I'll let you do that. Obviously, I know you've got your own story as well with training, nutrition, moving through all of the bits and pieces that we do when we start getting into this world. So yeah, give us a little rundown on who you are.
Well, yes, I'm an accredited practicing dietitian. So basically dietitian and nutritionist. I work in a private practice. And so I see a lot of people with, kind of disordered eating, eating disorders and that kind of thing is kind of one of my main areas of focus, as well as a lot of gut related issues as well. So I've been doing that for about a year and a half now. I've been, graduated from uni and all of that kind of thing. And yeah, I love it so much. I also have my Instagram, which is Healthy Bod, Healthy Mind. And so I post a lot about breaking down a lot of like nutrition bullshit and stuff like that over there. And just promoting like a healthy relationship with food, basically. Yeah. I guess that would sum things up.
And lots of funny reels.
Yeah.
My favorite.
All the reels.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what sort of got you into this space when we talk about the bullshit around nutrition and I guess, all of the shit that we're fed from a very young age. Like what sort of got you into this space and wanting to sort of bust those myths and sort of lean into the education around nutrition and managing your relationship with food and obviously allowing that to sort of extend to, women not middle age, but I guess women our age that have sort of gone through the years of battling with these struggles.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I see even people some of my clients are in their 70s or 80s and still struggling with that kind of thing, or they've had previous eating disorders and you can still see how much it affects them as well. So it's not just young people that get affected by this kind of stuff. It's crazy how long it kind of stays with you throughout your life. But yeah, for me personally, I guess I started uni having no idea what I wanted to go into. So I just started kind of very basic with a Bachelor of Science. And then I think probably second year into my degree, I was I kind of like nutrition. I was really into I think I'd started an Instagram to get healthy and get or not even get healthy, get skinny essentially. So I was like really taking in a lot of that diet culture stuff and being like, oh, like, okay, I need to look like a Victoria's Secret model. I need to be doing like crunches on my floor, you know, at 7 a.m. every morning and doing like 50 crunches. Like that's going to get me abs. Like that's going to get me shredded. That's what I need to be. And so I think that's kind of what drew me into nutrition, because I was like, okay, like I need to find out more, like how can I, you know, become this perfect, you know, epitome of, you know, the perfect body or whatever it kind of was. And I got really into like calorie counting and, you know, really restricting and, you know, being afraid to eat bread and like having all of these food rules and that kind of thing. And then, yeah, I kind of got drawn into nutrition. So I think, you know, my relationship with food definitely like fluctuated kind of over that time. And like, obviously, as I learned more, I became a lot less restrictive and, you know, understood things a lot better and was like, why am I doing this? This is so like silly to be doing. And like, it doesn't really matter what my body looks like. I need to, you know, eat to be healthy and like promote health rather than to look a certain way. So I guess like as I learned more, my mindset shifted a lot to become a lot more healthy and a lot more balanced. And I think that's kind of, I guess, my background in, you know, experiencing that myself. Well, it wasn't, I wouldn't say I had an eating disorder or anything like that. It was definitely like a disordered way of thinking about food and my body. And I think, yeah, that definitely has impacted me in my practice now in how, you know, I want to promote, you know, a good relationship with food over, you know, being a certain body weight or body type or that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think it's funny because when you start to approach things from that way, what you're actually chasing to begin with normally happens as like a byproduct of having that healthy relationship with food to begin with.
Exactly.
So I think that that's a really great place to start. As well with even like, you know, how you said you work with like the older generation, I guess older in comparison to our age. It's funny that you say that because I then think about, you know, like my mum, for example, and it's like at, you know, 50 plus years of age, I'm only just helping her understand, you know, how nutrition works and how to manage her food. And like I've had her, you know, tracking her calories just simply to have an understanding of, you know, what actually makes up her diet. And she's been able to run with that and just kind of use the education from that and not, you know, intentionally and specifically track her food to like hit a goal weight, but she's lost 10 kilos in the process. Yeah. So I think, it's definitely something that's, you know, you carry with you for a really long time. And it's scary to know that there's, you know, 70 and 80-year-olds out there who haven't yet dealt with this or had that education available to them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that where you sort of were going with that in the sense of, you know, it wasn't disordered eating that you had, but there were disordered patterns there is a really great place to start, because one of the reasons that I wanted to get you on was to unpack that idea a little bit more, because I think that people can typically sit, you know, in two camps where, you know, you might have a bad relationship with food and you might have disordered patterns and habits that aren't necessarily healthy or, you know, supporting you. Or you might actually have an eating disorder, or you might have binge eating disorder. And something that, you know, I tend to find is people struggle to differentiate between what that consists of, like what's the difference. Tend to find a lot of people, you know, identify as I have binge eating, but maybe they don't. Maybe it's just simply overeating because of like food restrictions and all of that. So how do you navigate, you know, you have a client who comes to you, how do you sort of navigate and unpack that process between, you know, what is actually disordered eating, what is just, you know, a bad relationship with food, and what's the different process between resolving those issues?
Yeah. So I guess in terms of like binge eating disorder, which is, you know, the recognized eating disorder essentially, there are certain criteria that you need to meet to fall under that category. So I guess in terms of like, describing it, it is more of a, or it is essentially a mental illness. So it's not just like, oh, sometimes I overeat, you know, if I go out for dinner or that kind of thing. It's like a compulsive, you know, mental illness that's always there. It, you know, recurs like very frequently. So I think usually it's about you have to have it happen 3 times a week or 3 times a month, or it's something along those lines, but it has to have like a certain amount of times that it happens in a period of time. And it's like over a long period of time that this is happening for you. And as I said, it's more of a compulsive thing. It's not something that you can control. It's, a mental illness that is, happening. So similar to something like OCD or, something like that, where it's not something you can really control. It's something that is kind of controlling you and your life. Whereas I would say overeating is like the other side of that, where it's like, you are having these episodes where you may binge or overeat on foods, but it may be a result of other things such as, maybe you're not eating enough throughout the day. So then by the end of the day, you're really hungry and you are overeating because your body is trying to compensate for that. Or maybe it's just you go out for dinner and you've, been restricting yourself from having all of this food, and then you overeat because you are not used to having, certain types of foods that you're restricting from yourself. So I think there is definitely a difference between the two. Obviously with binge eating disorder, we need like a team to kind of work to help you with that. So you would have, your GP, your psychologist, your dietitian. That's not to say if you are, struggling with overeating, you probably would also benefit from having, a dietitian and a psychologist as well, just to help with, the mental side of things, because obviously that can have a big impact, and, previous trauma can influence, your eating behaviors and that kind of thing as well. So both are extremely complex, and, totally different for every person as to what is triggering it and what is causing it. But very complex things.
Yeah, I think for a lot of the listeners, like there might have just been a light bulb moment. Because like I said, like there's a lot of people who identify or consider that they binge eat, and it doesn't necessarily fall within like that criteria that you mentioned.
Exactly.
I think that it's something that is, a lot more complex than just the simple overeating as, what you might do when you go out to eat with friends, or at the end of the day when you maybe haven't eaten enough.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's the sort of process, I guess, in terms of managing? I'm going to go down the, the person that is just simply overeating. I don't want to say simply, but they are overeating, opposed to like binge eating. And how do you go about putting some parameters in place to better manage that? Like, where does that come from, and what's sort of the process around managing someone's relationship with food, managing that eating behavior to get them into a place where they can eat consistently, they don't have any food fears, they're not sort of restricting and overindulging because of the way that they're structuring their day?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, with the overeating, it is a lot of the time due to restriction, whereas with the binge eating disorder, they could be eating anything essentially, like during that binge. It's not something just that they've kind of restricted or something that's really tasty. It can be, eating 3 bowls of porridge or something like that. Whereas, the overeating or the other side of like binging is often due to restriction. So I guess in terms of that, what we want to do is introduce those foods that you have been restricting, and I guess just giving yourself unconditional permission to eat them. And something I often say to people, which they think is like really crazy, but it really, really works. So say, for example, if you find that you are constantly like binging on chocolate or overeating chocolate, like you could eat an entire block. Buy 5 blocks of chocolate and keep it in your house at all times. And like as soon as you get rid of as soon as you get through 1 block of chocolate, replace it. So you've always got 5 there. I can guarantee like it loses its power over you, because you have it there all the time. You have permission to eat it whenever you want. And then it kind of allows your brain to think, okay, do I actually want it right now? Or, am I okay? Like, do I want something else, rather than when you've got it there and you've gone out especially to buy this 1 block of chocolate because you're really craving it. And then your brain's kind of like, okay, we need to get it out of the house. We need to eat this whole block right now. Like, that's it. Like, it needs to be gone. And kind of shifting your mindset and changing that up really, really helps. I think in terms of like getting out of that scarcity mindset where your brain is kind of like, okay, we need to have this. This is our last chance to have it. Like we just need to eat the whole thing. So I think, giving yourself unconditional permission to eat, foods that, maybe aren't necessarily the healthiest, but, allowing yourself to eat them in moderation can really, really help. So including foods like that in your diet, like day to day, rather than having it only on special occasions or, things like that.
Yeah, I love that. I've also heard of like the same thing in being like have it every single day as well. Like don't just have it in the house, but actually eat it every single day. Because it's like if you have it every day, it's not special anymore. So you can have it. So you're not going to go crazy on it when you think you're allowed to have it.
Exactly.
Which is like the opposite of what a lot of people do.
Yeah. And I guess in terms of other things, like making sure you are eating regularly. So I feel like a lot of people, when they are like counting calories or tracking and that kind of thing, people will save their calories to the end of the day because they're like, like I always want to eat so much at the end of the day. Like if I can just like save it, then I can, eat more then. But that kind of sets yourself up to overeat at the end of the day and kind of be in that cycle where it's like restriction and binging. So what we want to do is make sure that you are eating regularly. So having your breakfast, having a snack, having your lunch, having another snack, having your dinner, maybe having a dessert if you want, like, and kind of spacing it out so you're eating every 2 to 3 hours so that it's not going this really long period of time where you're not eating and then you're getting really ravenous and you can't control yourself around food. And then you make bad decisions in terms of like what you're eating, or you overeat what you have. So I think, eating really regularly, and just making sure that you're getting, a decent source of protein, getting some fiber in there, getting some carbohydrates, getting some fat, like just having really balanced meals, which are going to fill you up and keep you feeling full, is probably, one of the main things as well. So, just eating lots of whole foods and that kind of thing too.
Yeah, that was a topic that I wanted to go down with you. I guess like we have a lot of clients who do track their food. And they do that because they've got, athletic goals, or they've got aesthetic goals, and for, a period of time, or for a long period of time, it's required, to achieve what they want.
Yep.
The flip side of that is that we don't want to get dogmatic in our approach, that, the only way to achieve a result is to track your food. And we've, obviously got people who it's not necessarily for, like, they don't respond well to it, and it does encourage a negative relationship with their diet.
Yeah.
So how do you sort of encourage someone who is invested in, maybe looking a little bit better, being a little bit healthier, losing a little bit of weight, to go about, constructing their day of eating or a day on a plate without micromanaging their nutrition as such? Or what are some other strategies that you can start to implement rather than just going down this rabbit hole of like, I need to track my food 24/7. That's the only way I'm going to get anywhere.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's really important because, pretty much, none of my clients, I don't recommend any of them to track, because obviously a lot of the people that come and see me are struggling with disordered eating and, have a really poor relationship with food. And I think getting them to track is only going to end negatively for them. So what I generally recommend is, when you're looking at your plate, fill up half of your plate with a source of veggies. So whether that be your non-starchy veggies like your broccoli or cauliflower or that kind of thing, or, some salad or, anything like that. Then we want a quarter of your plate to be a source of protein. So whether that be, your meat, chicken, fish, tofu, legumes, all of that kind of thing. Tofu, did I say tofu? I don't know. And then the other quarter of your plate, we want to be a source of carbohydrates. And generally, obviously, I like to recommend your low GI carbohydrates. So things like your brown rice, your pulse pasta, brown bread, your whole grains, because they have a bit more fiber and they'll keep you feeling fuller for longer. And then we want to add a little bit of fat. So, whether that be a little bit of avocado, some olive oil, some dressing, anything like that. And just kind of thinking of things as a whole and kind of what we can add to the meal to make it more nourishing and more filling, and add in some extra color in terms of your veggies and that kind of thing. But I think if you, think of your plate like that and include some of each macronutrient, which is obviously your carbs, your fat and your protein, that is going to keep you feeling full and nourished. And yeah, I kind of usually like to look at it as, what can we add to this meal? Can we add some extra veggies? Do we have a source of protein in there? Like, what can we add to make it more filling and more nourishing? And generally I find, by people, adding in some extra veggies to their meals, they feel fuller and they feel like, better throughout their day. And, that in turn kind of helps to reduce their calorie intake overall, and often lead to weight loss, which generally isn't the main goal, but, it's a byproduct of, feeling good and fueling your body properly, really.
Yeah, it's such a light bulb moment, I guess, for someone who's so used to taking things away, for you to then say, no, what can we add? It's like, what the fuck? Like, what do you mean I can have more? Like, I'm looking at what I can actually include opposed to like, what do I have to remove? Just changes things.
Exactly.
Like,
and it's like, not even like in terms of like the meals and things that you're having. Like if you're having a burger, can I add like a side salad or can I add something to, add a bit of color or a bit of bit more nutrition in there? Or, if you're having pizza, instead of having a whole pizza, can I, have a salad on the side? Can I make sure there's a source of protein on my pizza and, that kind of thing, just to kind of bulk things up a bit without depriving yourself.
Yeah, I totally agree. I wanted to touch on the topic following on from that, I guess, of like, obviously removing food labels, removing good foods, bad foods, restriction. Yeah. The flip side that sort of comes with that, and for some people it is quite necessary, is the idea of weight gain and actually, putting on some size. So whether it be for health purposes or, for aesthetics, if you do want to build some muscle, that's a necessary process. So there can often be like, a lot of fear and a lot of reservations around that process of gaining weight. So I'm assuming, you've taken some clients through this process. How do you navigate that? And how do you deal with the mental barriers that come with intentionally gaining weight or needing to do that for, health purposes?
So I guess something that I do use with a lot of my clients is journaling. So I'll get them to do some journaling and kind of get all of those thoughts out of their head and onto some paper, because I find that can make things a lot less, scary. And, when all these thoughts are swirling around in your head, it can get really confusing and you don't know, what's going on, and it's hard to rationalize. So I find like journaling and, really focusing on, what else is good about me apart from, how my body looks. Like nothing really depends on, what I look like. I'm so much more of a person rather than just, my appearance. And, gaining weight is not the worst thing that can happen to me in the world. Like I'm still the exact same person. I'm still me. And yeah, just really kind of like taking yourself out of that mindset and being like, okay, if I'm gaining weight, there's all these other good things that are coming from it as well. Like I'm getting stronger. I have more energy. Like I feel so much better. Like, yes, my clothes aren't fitting, but I can go buy new clothes, and looking at the positive side of all of that really.
Yeah, I think a lot of that applies to even just looking at scale weight fluctuations. I can kind of see very similar stories being made, internally for someone of, even if you're not intentionally gaining weight, even if you're just weighing yourself just to see what you weigh. And it's like, the scale was up 500 grams yesterday than what it was today. Like, I'm a shit person, and you can start to run this narrative. I love the idea of journaling. It's something that I try to drill into my clients a lot. And I don't know, I think there's still maybe taboo around it and people aren't 100% for it. So I'm really glad that you actually mentioned that straight off the bat.
I think it's something it's something that you do need to try, and it can be like a bit hard to get into at first if you haven't done it before. But I think, just like literally like brain dumping, or whether you use journal prompts or, whatever kind of works for you, can be really helpful.
Yeah, it's a tool, and I wanted to go down this topic, was that I've used around emotional eating. And obviously we spoke about, overindulging, and we kind of spoke about the restriction side of that. But I tend to find like, overeating often comes from just, comfort eating or emotional eating.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's something that I've used to, help identify like, why are we actually doing this? Like, what am I seeking out of this? Like, you know, what emotion am I trying to kind of like comfort myself from? Do you tend to find that like that happens frequently? Is that something like emotional eating, comfort eating? Is it something that you experience?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. That's something I see a lot, and that's something I do use journaling a lot for. Like, especially, you know, after the fact, like if you have overeaten and you think like, you know, I've just had a shit mood and like, you know, something else has happened and then I've just overeaten.
We are all guilty.
And then, just, and then kind of, you know, taking a breath and being like, okay, let's journal about this. Let's work out kind of why this happened, and like writing down what your mood was like, you know, what has kind of like triggered this. And then kind of, you know, coming up with a more rational thought and being like, okay, like, you know, it's not the end of the world that I, you know, ate one biscuit and then I didn't have to eat the rest of the packet of them, or, you know, that kind of thing as well. But yeah, I think emotions definitely play into it a lot. And I think being able to identify the emotion, and, you know, sometimes I'll tell people to come up with like a list of alternatives that you can have to eating. So whether that be like, you know, going for a walk, or, you know, calling a family member, or reading a book, or doing something to like get your mind off that before it happens, and like kind of putting it in the pantry or somewhere where you're going to see it and being like, okay, what can I tick off this list before I eat? Like, is there something I can do that's going to serve me better in terms of like managing my emotions? Like, is eating the best thing for me right now? Is it actually going to help things, or is it just going to make me feel worse in the end?
I'm laughing, because like my clients would just be like, am I listening to Nat? Like the exact same thing. Like I literally created this like little spreadsheet like a nerd with like, what is the emotion? Like what can I do differently? And, you know, how am I going to change this next time? So that's really cool to hear as well. Yeah, super common.
But I think, it's a really like useful tool, especially like when you're just starting out with things and you're like, I can't stop emotional eating. And like, you know, what you need to do is kind of like create these new neural pathways within your brain. And like the more that you do something, the stronger it is and the easier it is to kind of, you know, like realize what's happening and, you know, do the other thing rather than eat. So it is just really like practicing it. And, you know, the more that you do it, the easier it becomes.
On the topic of overeating, this has literally just come to me because I've experienced it in the last 2 weeks, and I think every single woman can probably relate. Have you experienced or, you know, helped clients through that time of the month where you are just like, you know, ridiculously ravenous and it feels in that moment uncontrollable for some women? You know, where you're leading up to getting your period and, you know, you feel like you're out of control. And obviously that doesn't necessarily fall inside of binge eating. It doesn't fall inside of being restricted. It's just like something is happening internally and like I feel like I'm about to go fucking crazy. So how do you sort of navigate that? Like what are your tips and strategies around that for that time of the month?
Yeah, so I think honestly, it just comes down to, you know, the same principles again, just like making sure that your meals are filling enough and, you know, making sure that you are eating really regularly and kind of also allowing yourself to eat more because, you know, if you are genuinely really hungry, like it's okay to eat more, especially like, you know, if it's only a week out of the month, like it's not having the hugest impact. Obviously, don't go crazy just having like 20 chocolate bars a day, but like making sure that you're eating enough during the day and, you know, spreading things out, as I said, like eating regularly, making sure you're focusing on getting all of, you know, those main macros into your meals as well and making sure you're getting lots of fiber and, you know, drinking enough water and all of those little like things that can affect our hunger. But I think, just focusing on the basics and, not getting down on yourself if you do eat more than usual because it's totally normal and, you know, it's good to kind of listen to your hunger and, you know, honor that when you're really hungry.
Yeah, totally agree. I wanted to, obviously you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that you work with a lot of clients who have gut issues or around gut health. So can you just unpack that a little bit further? It wasn't something that I knew that you even, you know, delved in. And I think it's something that a lot of people may be uneducated about or don't have the resources to find the helpful information. So tell me a little bit about that.
Definitely. So I work with a lot of people who have IBS or who have undergone, bowel surgery and that kind of thing as well. So a lot of the time, if you have had surgery on your bowel, you have very poor bowel function afterwards and deal with a lot of like diarrhea or erratic bowel habit and that kind of thing. So I work with people to manage kind of what I call like stool modification. So, getting their stool or their poo to be like a good formed stool. So I talk about poo a lot in my practice. And then the other side of things is, a lot of people with IBS or, that kind of thing, which is irritable bowel syndrome. So people who are suffering with, severe bloating or diarrhea or constipation and that kind of thing, and working with them to get things a bit more regular and I guess improve their gut health and their bowel function really, so that they're not dealing with these symptoms, which can be really debilitating in your day-to-day life. I guess it's something, if you haven't experienced it, you don't really think of, but for a lot of people with IBS, like having to go to the toilet a few times an hour, or having the urgency and not being able to make it to a toilet or things like that is something that a lot of people deal with, which is so hard and obviously so embarrassing in your day-to-day life, or if you're at work or anything like that. So I work with a lot of people to help with that kind of thing.
So on that topic, I think a lot of that stuff is, and just from my personal experience, talking with clients, it's like I've gone to the doctor and they said it was normal. I've gone to the doctor and, bloating's normal, this response is normal, take this out of your diet, or, whatever it might be, just very simplified advice that doesn't necessarily help. So, is bloating normal? What is normal? How do we sort of go about identifying what's on the spectrum of normal and what falls outside of that, and where might someone need to go and seek some help?
So I guess in terms of like your bowel function, opening your bowels or going to the toilet anywhere from 3 times a day up to every 3 days is pretty normal. Where you want to go see a doctor is if, it has changed from, where you normally sit. So if you go to the toilet once a day and now you're going like 4 times a day, or if you, go once every 2 days and now you're going once a week, or that kind of thing, is probably where you want to, see a doctor, get some tests done, see whether there's something else that's going on that's affecting that. But usually where there's a change is where we want to, seek some assistance and see if there's something else going on. In terms of bloating, absolutely, as you said, some degree of bloating is totally normal, especially, if you've had a big meal, or, if you've eaten a lot, obviously it's got to go somewhere and, sit somewhere in your stomach. Other things that can affect bloating is, if you're eating really quickly, you are swallowing a lot of air, and that can kind of like build up in your stomach as well. Or, things like chewing gum or, drinking bubbly drinks and that kind of thing can also affect bloating. Where you probably want to get some help is if it's really painful bloating, or it's constant bloating, or, it's coming along with, a lot of pain or cramps or, that kind of thing as well, where it's really kind of negatively affecting your life. But I think seeking help with that, it is, as I said, super individualized. Like every person that I see is so different in terms of what is triggering their symptoms and that kind of thing, which is why it is always best to get kind of, individualized help if you can from, a dietitian or your GP or something like that. Because it is so different for everyone. Another thing that is a really big trigger in these types of things as well is stress. So managing your stress is like a big thing that I work with a lot of people as well.
Yeah, I actually remember you posted something about that. Like, it would have been last year maybe. And it was like, was really stressed, did this like, yoga flow or like stretching routine. Yeah. And I literally tried it and I was like, what the actual fuck? Like when I was so bloated and I was like, I'm just going to try this. Like if Sophie said it, it's going to work. Yeah. So I did it and I took a photo and I was like, this is insane. Yeah,
it's honestly something I do a lot. Like especially like after a big day of work, I find like I am always like super bloated because it's a lot of the time like stress related or, you know, that kind of thing. Even if I haven't eaten a lot that day, like, and I'm like, why am I so bloated? And I find just like lying on the floor and like doing some really simple like stretches and that kind of thing, like really, really helps in terms of, reducing the bloating and just feeling a bit more calm and better.
Yeah, it's huge. If you are listening to this and like you're skeptical, go and do it. Like, go and do it because it blew my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So gut health is a real like trigger word. It's something, you know, that everyone wants to fix with a magic potion and a magic pill or a supplement or something. I've had a few clients recently ask me, like, you know, what can we actually do to improve our gut health, and, you know, what steps can we actually take on a daily basis to improve that without going down that route of, you know, buying a pill or a potion or whatever. So what's your your general advice for anyone who doesn't necessarily have anything wrong but is just curious or wants to know what they could potentially be doing better or differently?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, as you said, if you have no issues with, you know, your gut health or you're feeling pretty good, that's great. That's perfect. That's what we want to hear. Absolutely do not buy any supplement or any pill that is for gut health because they do nothing. What I would recommend is making sure that you're getting in your sources of prebiotics, which is essentially your dietary fiber. So making sure you're getting a lot of, you know, various different colors, different types of fruits and veggies and whole grains, because fiber is basically the undigestible part of plant foods. So all the different types of plants that you can get in, like your nuts and your seeds and your grains and your fruits and your veggies, getting in a good variety of those during your week is really, really beneficial for your gut bacteria because they feed off fiber. So the more fiber and the more different types of fiber that you eat will feed all of those different varieties of gut bacteria, because you've got so many different types of gut bacteria that live inside your gut. So the more various types of fiber, the more that it will feed those various types of good bacteria. The other thing as well is including sources of probiotics. So a lot of people will have heard of, like, obviously probiotic pills that you can have. You don't necessarily need to have those. There's not really much evidence to support having that if you are generally healthy. Like, there are some instances where it may be beneficial if you have, you know, certain types of IBS and that kind of thing. It sometimes can help, but usually for healthy people, I wouldn't recommend spending money on probiotics or anything like that, because you can get it through food. So having things regularly like yogurt, which have your lactobacilli in there, or otherwise your fermented foods, so things like kimchi or sauerkraut and that kind of thing, are really good in terms of, feeding a source of probiotics, which is essentially like the live bacteria. So introducing the live bacteria or introducing the prebiotics, which is your food that feeds the bacteria in your gut. So those are kind of the two main things I would say to help promote your good gut health.
Amazing. So simple. Like, so simple. I think everyone's just waiting for you to say, and this, and that, and this, and do this.
And have this data, which I'm selling.
Use my code. That's really helpful. Because, again, like, I get that question so often, and most of the time my answer is, you're doing everything. You know, like, you know, we're doing all the things, like, we're getting enough fiber, diet's high in micronutrients, you know, you're eating all of the things that we should be eating, just don't change anything, basically. So, it's really good to have that reinforced, which is awesome. Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I think we've covered everything that I wanted to get through. I know that, you know, my clients and our clients as a whole will take a lot of value out of the stuff that we've spoken about. So if you want to plug yourself, you know, where can everyone find you on the socials? You're very active on social media and you have the funniest reels, so everyone go and follow Sophie.
Yes, so you can find me at Healthy Bod, Healthy Mind on Instagram. Give me a follow over there. As you said, I'm very active over there.
And recipes, lots of recipes, which we love, because I can't help anyone with that. Thank you so much for coming on.
No worries, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
Yay.
All right, guys. So if you liked this episode, please tag and share on the stories. You can tag at STCfit, at Nat Jurek, STCfit. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you on the next fortnight's episode.